Hi, welcome to Architect Tips. The purpose of the channel is to teach you some quick tips in Photoshop tailored towards architectural visualization, which will hopefully speed up your workflow. Let's dive right in. In this video, I want to have a look at how we can recreate a volumetric lighting effect, something like we see in this image. Typically out of a render, you may get something like this, where you have an illuminated source and a bit of light spill on the ground. But unless you have some volumetric fog in your scene, you're not going to see that volumetric light interacting with that fog. So how we can recreate that is if we use the lasso tool, make a rough shape, which is going to be a volumetric light, something like this. So we just want to make sure we make it the size of the spill of the light, and then it angles to the light source, something like that. Once you have your selection, we want to go select, modify, and feather. This will just give it a softer look on the edges. So let's something like 80 pixels. The shape and the visual look of that selection now changes. This shows you it's a feathered effect. I'm going to come over here and create a gradient adjustment layer. If you double click into the swatch, this is where we can change the color. So we want it to go to clear, but we'd obviously don't want black. So let's use a warmer yellowish tone. This can always be changed at a later date. You can go back and do this because we use an adjustment layer rather than using the gradient fill tool over here. So let's say something like that as a starting point. We need to reverse this, so we need the light source to come from up here and then to go to a clear. So we just change the angle. So something like this might work. Okay, that. You may want to just adjust this selection a little bit and paint out a little bit on the top. You can play around with this just by painting into the mask tool with the brush tool. We can change the opacity of that now, so the strength. So something like this might work quite nicely. To enhance this a little bit more, we can create a lens flare effect. I've just found this online, which I think could work quite nicely. So I'm just going to drag this into my scene. Use the move tool, V on the keyboard. Changing the blending mode of this will get rid of most of that black. So let's put it onto a screen. But you can still see there's some harsh lines from the size of the image that we're using. So we don't want to use this. We need to paint this out. So adding a mask onto that and getting the brush tool. This is where we can paint out some of those harsh lines. Maybe shrink these a little bit so they're not so large. You can paint into this a little bit as well. So something like that might work. So I'm going to move that now into position over here. I think a little bit of rotation would help this to give you a bit more of a realistic look. And now we can also drop the opacity down a touch on that. So something like that is actually the kind of effect we're looking for. We can put these two layers now into a group by selecting them, pressing Ctrl G on the keyboard, and that groups them. And now what I can do is I can duplicate that group by pressing Ctrl J on the keyboard, or just dragging it down onto the plus icon, which copies that group. Moving the one underneath into position over here, I can then scale this by Ctrl T on the keyboard and just scaling this down. So again, looking at the spill of light on the floor, making sure this looks an appropriate size. So maybe something like that looks good. So now you have the two lights, and now we just need to drop the opacity of this one a touch because it's further away in the distance. And there you go. That's how you can create a sort of volumetric looking effect by using Photoshop. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, it would be really appreciated if you give it a like and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more useful tips. Thank you for watching.